Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending and also spending some of your Friday afternoon with us here. I can promise you, Greg will make it worth your while. No pressure, Greg. Before I do some introductions, I just want to remind you, if you are a student and your instructor offered extra credit to attend this workshop, feel free to put in the chat your name and your instructor's name so I can report your attendance back to them. And as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to also put those in the chat. Greg and I will work together to address each of them. And feel free to do it without the presentation. You do not have to hold them until the end because we'd love to have some interaction and real-time answers for you. So I will introduce myself. My name is Lisa Petty. I am the Career Center Coordinator and run everything career services related on campus. And our presenter today is Greg Smith, who was formerly with Shasta College. He was the Director of Human Resources for a number of years, worked in administrative services for a little bit before he transferred to the San Diego Community College District. So now he is in San Diego, but is willing to present to us and give us some knowledge about his experience, which he has a lot of in this area. So I will pass that off to you, Greg, and you can take the reins.
Thank you, Lisa, and good afternoon, everyone. As Lisa said, I really say good on you for being here. I know giving up some time on your Friday, probably eager to start the weekend, but you're here to invest in your own skills and help your own job search, and that is commendable. And I think that is an important starting point, is that this takes work. Nobody was born good at interviewing. Some of us are more naturally outgoing. Some may be a little bit better at just off the cuff thinking on the fly, answering questions and building some rapport. But interviewing is difficult. You're sitting in front of people that you don't know, perhaps even worse, that you do know. I mean, they're judging you, and that doesn't feel good. It feels very uncomfortable. And so you've got to build some skills around that, and that takes practice. And so I'm going to start sharing a slideshow. I've prepared this more than anything to be a reference tool for you. And so I've sent it to Lisa so that she can share it with you, and you can have this to look back on. We're going to go over quite a bit, and I'm going to leave this up on the screen while I kind of introduce myself, but you got a sense of everything that I'm going to be telling you right here in one slide, so you can look back and I think it's important to start with credentials. And anytime someone offers you advice, I think it's a really valid and important question to ask. Why should I trust the advice you're giving me? What qualifies you to be telling me what I should do when I go into an interview? And that's a very fair question. I want to answer that. So before I came to Shasta College, I worked for over 12 years with the US Department of Labor and the federal government. And I was doing a job where we evaluated the way that companies did their hiring practices. Over the course of that 12 plus years, I got to see how hundreds of different companies hired. I got to see what they did when they advertised jobs, what they looked for when they invited who's going to come in for an interview, who are we not going to invite. I got to see what they asked people and how they scored that. And so I got a lot of inside information about what companies are looking for when they interview. On top of that, I've researched a lot in this because as I transitioned into human resources as my career, I needed to be good at the recruiting process, the hiring process. How do we define what we want in the person we're going to hire? And then how do we actually ask them questions that are going to get that information so we can make those decisions? So that's where I've built my knowledge in this area. I've also interviewed for many jobs over the course of my career. I'll talk about a couple of those as examples as we go along. So I have some practical experience on the other side of the table, being interviewed, of course, and then I participated in more interviews as a hiring manager than I can count at this point. So that's the experience that informs what I'm going to share with you, things that I've learned along the way. Some of this I've learned from other professionals in the field that I know and respect and trust what their advice is, and a lot of it is built on my own experience. So we'll dive in now and talk about the things that I've had up on the screen here for you to see. The most important thing that I hope you remember walking away from this is that the interview is not about you. And that may sound weird because the entire conversation is basically you telling a hiring manager information about yourself. But the information is all about what they need as an employer. And the reason that I stress this is because I've seen a lot of bad interview advice around how you can interview the company during the interview. And I'm here to tell you that's a terrible idea. If for no other reason, most interviews are pretty short. You may get a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour. As you get further along in your career, you may have an all-day interview where you're talking to multiple people, but you're probably not sitting with just one person for 4 hours where you can get really in depth. You probably only have 12, maybe 10 questions, an hour or less. And so every minute in that is precious, right? They're going to evaluate, can you do the job we're hiring for? And should we offer you this job? So you want everything in that to be information that helps them see why you would be successful in their job. So if you waste time in the interview talking about or asking about your needs, then you're taking time away from your opportunity to show them why they should give you a job offer. Once you do get offered a job, that's where it's time to talk about your needs. That's when it's about you. What's my work schedule going to be? What's the pay? What's the benefits? Is this going to work for me? That's when that happens. But until you have a job offer, it doesn't matter what your needs are. You need to get the company to see that you're the best candidate and get them to offer a job. So if you remember that philosophy, it will guide a lot of the other things that we need to do along the way to be successful in interviewing. The interview is not about you, it's about what they need at every single step. And so I want to start then in the actual process of talking about how hiring managers think. When they go to hire for a job, what is it that they're thinking about? And it's not complicated. And once you know it, it'll help you look at a job ad and read it and decipher what they're going to ask you about in an interview. You can predict not the exact wording of a question, but what are they going to ask me about? What should I be ready to talk about? And so as a hiring manager goes to fill a position, the first thing they need to do is define, what are we looking for? And so that's something like, in this job, you're going to have to do customer service. And so we need somebody with customer service skills. Well, what are those? It's the ability to communicate effectively with people. You've got to be able to resolve problems for someone. If someone comes in and they're upset, you've got to be able to de-escalate that a little bit, find out what they need, help them get to the outcome they're looking for. So they define what those skills are and what they're looking for. Next thing they got to decide is, what am I going to ask you in the interview so that I can determine if you have those skills or if you have the ability to learn those skills, depending on the level of the job. And so that's where they kind of define, what do I want to hear? When I ask somebody, so tell me about your customer service experience. What is it that I'm hoping to hear back to help me hire in this job? And then finally, how are we going to decide who we're going to offer a job and who we're not going to offer a job? And there's a lot that can go into that decision. For some positions, there are very clear technical qualifications you have to meet. If you're applying to be a phlebotomist, you have to have training and education in that specific field, right, to be qualified. And so that can be a pretty easy gauge. We're not going to offer this to anybody who doesn't already have that. This isn't a train on the job and learn the skills kind of a thing. But if you're applying for a bank teller position, they really might just be looking for the underlying skill sets. Do you have some math skills? Do you have some customer service skills? Great. We'll teach you some of the nuances of this particular work, but we just need to know you have those basics. So if I know that this is what a hiring manager has to be thinking about, when I pick up and read a job ad or a vacancy announcement or a job description, I can go through and kind of highlight the key terms in there. So somebody says in a job ad, we're looking for an energetic, friendly person to do as our cashier. Well, they're telling you right there, right? Energetic. They want somebody who gives off a lot of positive energy to customers walking in. They want somebody who creates an immediate kind of positive environment. And if they say friendly, then they want somebody who's going to be able to immediately kind of project that openness, somebody that's approachable, you're polite, you're respectful, you're smiling, you're asking people questions to kind of engage them. Some of those elements of customer service, I can see that just when I read that job ad, and I can start to now predict you're going to ask me about my experience in similar roles, if I have it. If I don't have that prior experience, you're going to ask me about, kind of questions about my personality, perhaps, or other things that I've done in school, in volunteer, work with a church, or some kind of other environment where they can see the behaviors that we call friendly, that we call kind or compassionate, or other terms that go along with good customer service. So I can anticipate now what you're going to ask me about. And so I can think back through, what have I done in my schoolwork, or what have I done in prior jobs, or those other experiences I have that I can talk about to show, this may not be the exact same thing that I'll be doing if I worked for you, but it's the same kind of skill set. Here's how you know that I have the knowledge, skills, and abilities you're looking for. And so as a hiring manager sets this out, here's an example, I think, that really boils down every single job you ever apply for. They're looking to hear a couple of key things: that you'll work hard, that you're smart about it, and you work well with others. In every job you ever have, you're going to have to work with other people. Now, in some jobs, you might do very little with other people, but it's never going to be zero. None of us work entirely by ourselves, completely on an island. And so there has to be a degree of, I can get along with others and work well. I can resolve conflicts between us. I can share responsibility for assignments and make sure that they get done. Any of you that have been on a group project, I bet all of you have, know what that's like, right? When others aren't necessarily pulling their weight, how do you resolve that? But they want to hear something that tells them this person is going to work hard, they're going to work smart, they're going to work well with others. They're also thinking about, and what will become, I think, the most important themes throughout this is, what are you going to contribute? And this is where you can dramatically increase your likelihood of getting a job offer. If you can get the hiring manager, the person who's interviewing you, to start imagining you do the job, then you are a long way towards getting a job offer. Because once they start to get this idea in their head, when you talked about that experience you had at that other job, or what you did in that class assignment, that's exactly what we want to see in this job. They start to envision you doing this well. And everything now that they hear that confirms that, they're going to latch onto and hold on to. And it's just going to strengthen that opinion they're forming. And so in order to kind of sell a person on that, you want to talk about the results from what you've done before, and then how you got those results. And so if they ask a question like, tell me about a time that you disagreed with somebody, how'd you resolve it? The result is you were able to resolve it. And then they want to hear how you did it. What are the steps you took to resolve that? And so you can start to formulate how you're going to answer these questions just by following that model of, here's the outcome, here's the result, here's the thing that you want to see, and now here's how I did it. So that they can get an idea of, what are you going to do if we hire you? When you show up on day one, how are you going to go about doing your work? What you've done before is the best way to predict what you're going to do tomorrow. And it's the best way to tell somebody what they can expect if they hire you. That all gets to them being able to imagine you doing this job really well, which is what you want to accomplish. The thing about hiring managers, though, is we often use common things that have been done over and over again, and they aren't necessarily all that effective. And this is the hardest part about interviews for me, is we often ask questions that are misleading. And there's kind of this secret code that you learn as you gain experience. The more interviews you do, the more you learn what the expected answer is to some of these questions. But what we don't actually want is for you to answer the question or tell us the truth. Because I think the first answer to, so why do you want to work here, which might be the most common interview question you'll come across, the first answer is, I need a paycheck, right? Like, I didn't show up here to just volunteer my time, or I had to come in to volunteer. I'm here because I have bills to pay. I've got things to take care of. I need a paycheck. I need stable income. But if that's your answer, you're not going to get scored well in that interview. They're going to think, oh, you're just going to take whatever job comes along. You don't really want to do this work. And if you find a job that pays more, you're immediately going to leave. And so there is a secret code to answering this question, that once you understand what they want to hear in this, you can answer it well. but you've got to learn that. Nobody just knows this, right, the first time they ever show up for an interview. Similar questions that you might come across, something like, if I called your current supervisor, what would they say about you? Or if I talked to your coworkers, how would they say you do your work? And part of this question is, I would like to have honest feedback from other people about the way that you do your work so that I can decide if I should hire you. But nobody is going to answer it that way. You're not going to say, well, if you called my current supervisor, they'd say, I tend to show up a little bit late. I don't work as hard as they would like, and they have to talk to me too often about chewing gum at work or whatever. You're not going to answer it that honestly, right? Because you know immediately, they're like, all right, well, I'm not going to hire you. And so there is a kind of a formula to answering this question that gives them what they want without totally ruining your chances of getting that job. Same with biggest frustration in your current job. People that don't know how to answer that and walk in and answer it honestly, what the hiring manager is going to hear is, oh, this person's going to be problematic to work with. They're going to complain about things. I don't want that. I'm not going to offer them a job. What's your greatest weakness? Of course, you don't walk in and say, well, my greatest weakness is that I sometimes, like to steal from the companies I work for, but I'm working on it. Of course, you're not going to say that, right? They're not looking for you to necessarily say that. So you've got to learn how to deal with some of these questions. And I'm going to give you some tips around how you can do that effectively so you don't get derailed by these questions. More importantly, you can turn these questions with your answer into something that actually gives them useful information that's going to improve your chances of getting a job offer. And so the secret language of interviews, how do you kind of figure out this code of what they really want? When hiring managers ask, tell me why you applied, or why are you interested in this job, or what made you decide to come look for a job here, what they want to hear is some passion. You really want this job. You know what you're applying for, and you actually want to show up and do this work. And there's a lot of things that we think that means as hiring manager. We think that means that you'll actually come in with a good attitude because you're going to enjoy what you're doing. We think that means you're more likely to stay. We're not going to train you, get you going in the job, and then 6 months later you leave, and now we've got to start all over and hire somebody else. We think that if you really care about the work, that you're going to put more effort into it and you're going to produce better outcomes. And so you want to be able to convey that you understand what you've applied for, kind of who this company is, and why it is that you want this job. That is not to meet my basic life needs and a paycheck. They want to know that you're going to work hard for us. As I showed a couple slides ago, tell me that you're going to work hard, you're going to work smart. I want to know that you're going to put in the effort. And so in the answers to some of these questions, what I'm really looking for is how much effort are you going to put into your work? If you do something wrong, are you going to take ownership for that? Are you going to be accountable? Understand what you did wrong, figure out how you're going to change it and never make that mistake again. That kind of answer is really good because it shows that effort, but that's not really the question they necessarily ask. So you've got to know to craft your answer that way. When it comes to questions about job skills, which are always going to come up, it's the most fundamental thing they're looking for, right? Basically, I want you to convince me, as me being the hiring manager, that you either already know how to do this job or you've got the capacity to learn it quickly. And so that's what we were talking earlier about, in a bank teller or a cashier type position, you may not have ever worked a register or the computer at the bank. But if you can do some math, and if you have some customer service skills, I can teach you that other piece of it. I can assume that you're going to learn that fairly quickly. The things that are harder to teach, right, are math. That's why you've got Shasta College and really great instructors there to do that work. It's not an easy job. So they want to know that you know that piece, and they can teach you some of those other nuances. And finally, can I trust and rely on you? If I hire you, are you going to make me regret it in 3 months because of something you've done? You want to be able to communicate these 4 things across the questions you're answering. But when you get those questions that don't entirely make sense, like why are you asking me what my current manager would think about or would say if you ask them what they think of me, you want to frame your answer around these things. That I think my current manager would tell you how hard I show up and work every single day, that I'm always there putting in the effort. I don't always get it right, but I always put in the effort. That kind of answer is really strong because it gives me a reason to believe you're going to do that for me if I hire you. So when it comes time to answering questions, you've got to know your weaknesses, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about your strengths. And the reason that that framework is important is it helps you decide what it is that you want to get out of a job. If before you've even applied, you think about what is this job advertisement, the things that I know about this because I have friends that have worked in this area, or my parents or my professor or somebody I know and trust has told me this would be a good job for these reasons. You want to know, what do you want to get out of the job if you're hired? And if you don't already have the knowledge and the skills, you don't have direct experience related to that job, you need to be able to communicate that. If you do, then you need to be able to communicate, I can do these basic functions. I'm here to develop further. I'm here to gain more experience, to continue to build on what I already know. That's going to let me advance on to more complex work, more difficult assignments, greater responsibility. You need to know why, you need to be able to communicate why you're there and what you hope to get out of it, so that you can frame everything that you have to say about yourself as part of your strengths. And it's perfectly okay when you're talking about this to answer that you really just need a job to pay the bills while you're going to school. And the reason that that's perfectly okay is because a lot of employers have positions that they expect there to be turnover. They are advertising specifically because of the flexibility in work hours that they can offer, that you're going to need to manage around a school schedule. It's going to change semester to semester, right, as you have different classes. They know that going in. And it's okay to be honest about that if that's all that you want out of that job. In fact, if you go in and you kind of hide that, and they're thinking, I can offer you, the same schedule, the same every week, the same hours, the same days, and month after month, you're going to be able to work that. And you come in, right before the fall semester and say, hey, I have my new schedule. I'm not available on Tuesdays anymore. They're going to be really frustrated by that. It might mean that you're going to have to quit that job in order to stay in school. The expectations weren't communicated up front. So you've got to be upfront about that. If that's really the most important thing for you at this moment in time, that's fine. But if it's the others, if it's, I've never had a job in this field before, I really want to build some customer service skills. I know that's going to be important for my career. And, I've heard, or I've experienced as I've come into your store, or, I know people that have worked here, whatever it is, that has, led me to believe that I'm going to learn how to do customer service really well working with you. That's why I'm here, to build those skills. You can turn then the underlying things that you do well that contribute towards that into strengths. Well, I've never worked in the specific field that you're hiring for, or in the specific role that you're hiring for, but in my experience volunteering, in my experience doing these other things, I have learned how to resolve conflict with people that are upset. I have learned how to be friendly and engaging with customers as they come in. And I want to continue to learn that and be able to apply it in this professional setting. That's a very powerful response. It shows I've got the underlying skills you're looking for. You're also communicating the desire and the interest, so that why did you apply for this job, or why do you want to work here? You've been able to articulate an answer that suggests to me as a hiring manager, you're going to show up, you're going to work hard, you're looking to improve and learn. And so over time, I think you're going to get better and better at this. It's a lot of positive things to me, imagine you doing this work. So you've got to be able to articulate your why for showing up, and build that into multiple questions they ask. All right, so let's dive into the actual answering of questions. And here I want to share one of the most interesting interviews that I ever had. And this is the first time I learned the interview is all about what the employer needs. It has nothing to do with my needs. So I was 20 years old. I had just moved from Redding to Phoenix, Arizona. and I needed to find a job pretty quickly. I just needed a paycheck. I needed to pay the rent on a new apartment I was about to get. So I walked into Fry's Electronics. If you have never been to one, it's like a Best Buy, but probably 10 times bigger. It's a huge warehouse, like going into Costco, but it's all electronics. And I went to buy a computer cable so I could print out resumes to go apply for jobs. This is way back before social media and the majority of things being online. I hate how old I am, but it's true. And so I went in to buy this computer cable, and I saw as I came in a table, and they were they had applications, and they were accepting applications for jobs that they had open right there. And so I needed a job. I walked over to the table. Hey, can I see what jobs you have open? And a guy comes walking up behind me, and he says, "Hey, are you here to apply for a job?" I said, "Well, maybe. What jobs do you have?" And he goes, "I tell you what, I've got one question for you." What's that? If I give you a schedule, will you show up to work? Yeah, absolutely. That's why I'm here. Great. Tells them to get me the paperwork to go over and do the drug test. And if everything comes back clean, you can start Monday at 8 a.m. or whatever. He had one question. It went right to exactly what they needed. They needed people to show up, which told me some things, right? They probably have a lot of turnover. They're hiring younger people. I'm 20, and they're not as reliable, perhaps. And so he was very, very clear on their needs. We'll teach you everything else you need to know. We need you to show up. And if you can do that, then we're going to hire you. It's the most honest interview I've ever had. So clear and direct. The reality is most interviews don't quite go that way, of course. And there's a lot more to it. So in order to answer interview questions successfully, it starts with a little bit of research. You don't have to do a ton. You don't have to get to know the company intimately. You don't have to go and try to find employees who will let you basically interview them about what they do. All you really need to do is go to their website, if they have one. Some smaller ones may not. Look at the About Us section of their website, where they tell you a little bit about what their mission is, who they are, what they do, and be able to weave that into your answer in some way. When I saw that your mission is to help connect people in our community with healthcare resources, I'm very passionate about healthcare and making sure that everybody in our community has access to healthcare. And so I was excited and really looking for a job that fit my skills within your organization so that I can contribute to that. That little bit of research can help you frame an answer like that, where if you don't know really anything about the company and they ask, so why are you interested in working here? Your answer is going to be limited, and you're going to have a much harder time selling them on the idea that you're going to care enough to really show up and give your best effort if they hire you. Which, remember back to what I told you before, hiring managers really want to hear and try to decide, is this person going to show up and put in work hard for us? So that little bit of research can be extremely helpful. If it's a customer service type position where you could actually go and stand and see people doing their job, the job that you're going to be applying for, that can be really powerful. And so you might be able to say something like, I worked at Best Buy many years ago. And when I went in, I could say, well, I've been a customer of Best Buy for a number of years, and I'm always impressed with how well you provide customer service. People are friendly, they're approachable, they're responsive. Always been able to help me find what I needed quickly. You don't treat me like I don't know what I'm talking about. You help me to understand. I want to come learn how to do that and be part of that. I think that would be a great place to work, and that's why I'm here applying today. That little bit of research helps you frame that answer in a way that they're going to hear. You understand what you're walking into. You're going to be motivated to do this, and you're going to work hard for us. When you answer questions, don't try to use big words and complicated language. Short sentences and simple language are the best way to communicate with people. A lot of times in interviews, managers will have to talk to 7, 8 different people over the course of a day as they interview. They're not going to remember the majority of what you said. To be more memorable, it needs to be short and to the point. And so keep it simple. You don't need to find the best word to describe how you would approach customer service. You don't need to find the best word for how you would resolve conflicts with people or how you've succeeded in working with teams. You just got to be able to very simply tell them, this is what I've done that's been successful in working with teams, so that they can remember it, so that you don't get tripped up trying to find the right word and you use the wrong word. And now you're feeling embarrassed about that and you're starting to get more nervous. You're just going to make it harder for yourself. So keep it short, keep it simple, keep it direct. When you're answering questions, anytime that you can follow this formula, you'll be more successful. What outcome did you produce, and then how did you do it? In short, outcomes, then behaviors. So they might ask a question like, we're really looking for somebody that's got strong statistical analysis skills. I've done really well in my statistical analysis courses, getting A's in all 3 of them. The way that I've done that is, you tell me the outcome, your success, and immediately I'm invested in you now. Okay, great, you can accomplish a task successfully. That's exactly what I need. And then I get to hear how you did it. And so now I can imagine you doing those same things in my job and being successful at it. And like I said earlier, as soon as you've got me imagining you doing my job well, the likelihood of me offering you a job is going way up. You want to show enthusiasm. And we'll talk about what you can do body language wise and with your nonverbal communication to do that. But you want to convey and project physically some enthusiasm for what you're talking about, for the idea of having this job. And so you might, as you give examples of things you've done well that are related to that, talk about how it felt a little bit. I had a really great time learning how to do standard deviations in my statistical analysis class. It was really exciting to have that breakthrough in understanding. I did it by, and then go on with how you accomplished it. That enthusiasm, though, creates enthusiasm in them about you. Like, wow, that person was really energetic and motivated, and I loved that about them. They won't even necessarily know exactly what it is they're responding to, but it's you conveying a little bit of emotion there. You want to be able to project into the future, because this is what the hiring manager is doing, right? They're talking to you today about what you've done in the past so that I can predict what you're going to do in the future. And so if we take my data analysis question here and carry it a little bit further in the answer. So tell me a little bit about your what you've done around data analysis. So I've had a lot of success in my statistical analysis and my research method classes. I've gotten A's in all of them so far. I've learned a lot about this. The way that I've done that is by structuring my homework so that I could read the concept. Then I went out and looked at newspaper articles, the research that my instructor assigned, other examples to understand it in practice. And then I was able to translate that information, my understanding from that practice, into my assignments. And I was really excited because I had these moments of breakthrough into my understanding. That always felt really good. And so as I think about the job that you're hiring for, that I've applied for, I can see where I can use those same skills as I do these assignments and do it really well for you. You start to help them think about you in their job succeeding. The only way you're going to get good at this is by practicing. You have to do this repeatedly. And we don't interview all that often. Maybe for a short period of time as you're applying for jobs, you go to several interviews over the course of a couple of weeks, but then you get a job and you stop going to interviews, and it may be years before you do it again. So when you're getting ready to apply for jobs, start practicing a little bit every day. And it could be as simple as you sitting in front of the mirror by yourself, in your house, in the bathroom, wherever, asking a question and then practicing your response so that you can see your facial expressions. You can hear the way your voice sounds. You can work on how you're going to answer these questions over and over again so you get to feel very comfortable with it. So that when it happens in the interview, when you're a little bit nervous about sitting in front of this person and they're judging whether or not you're going to do good work for them, you don't have to think about, how am I going to say this? Or what was that formula? I need to talk about my results and then how I did it. I need to remember to talk about the future. The more nervous you get in that moment, the harder it is to remember all of these things. If you've practiced it, you're just going to do it in that moment because you've done it enough times. You've built some memory around that. You don't have to actually consciously think about it. Same way as when I hop on a bicycle, I can immediately ride off on it. I've done it so many times, right? I've got the practice. All right, so some practical advice around interviewing. You want to get there early. And so if you have an in-person interview and they told you, we need you there by 12:30, show up 7 minutes early. What's the magic around 7 minutes? Why this number? It's not that magic. If you're 10, that's okay. If it's 5, it's okay. Thing is, you don't want to be so early that it's kind of awkward as you stand there and they're going about whatever business they're doing and you're just waiting and you've got 20 minutes until they're going to be ready for you to start your interview or sit down and fill out paperwork or whatever you have to do first. It's too much time. It can be a bit awkward. 7 minutes gives you enough time that if something goes wrong along the way, you have time to solve it. And so you realize walking in that you left something out in your car, you've got time to go back to your car and grab it. If you realize that you got a little smudge on your shirt, you've got time to go to the restroom and clean that up. But you're not there so long that you end up just getting bored, or it's just kind of awkward with you standing there and maybe you're trying to make small talk and it's just not a comfortable situation. So you've got enough time to deal with things that come up, but you're not there so long that it starts to get awkward. And that's that magic of that 7 minute mark. If you have an interview over Zoom or Skype or some other kind of video technology like this, you need to give yourself more time because technology problems are probably going to take a little bit longer to resolve. So highly recommend you log in at least 15 minutes early. Make sure your video is working, make sure your audio is working, check your background around you. You want to make sure that you don't have anything hanging up on the walls that is going to distract from your interview, give them any reason to think that you might not be as professional as what they're looking for. It just gives you a chance to check that everything's working. And the great thing about Zoom, for those of you that were here a little early, I did it. You can log in, you can make sure things are working, then you can turn off your video, you can put yourself on mute, and it's fine. But if you go to log in and something isn't working quite right, you've got some time to figure it out. I can't get my internet to work. Fortunately, I've got good reception on my phone. I can log in there now. You've got time to kind of solve some of those problems. When you walk in the door, if you're doing it in person, you're going to make first impressions. And I don't care who it is that you interact with first. Everybody's opinion that you come across matters because the hiring manager might ask them, so hey, when that person walked in, what was your first sense of them? What do you think about them? You don't know whose opinion might influence whether or not you get a job offer. And so there's a simple formula. Smile. Always project positivity. Just come in and smile. Make eye contact. And if this is not entirely comfortable for you, that's okay. You've got to practice and teach yourself how to do this comfortably. And eye contact can be uncomfortable for some of us. And it may not make us want to smile when we make eye contact with people. You've got to practice it though, because if you don't, there's a good chance that a hiring manager or somebody else is going to view that as you're not confident in yourself or you're not very personable. And if I'm working with you, I'm not going to like working beside you because you're going to be standoffish or you're going to be withdrawn and reserved and it's going to be hard to get what I need from you. Or if it's a customer service related position, you're not going to serve our customers very well. None of that might be true. You might be fantastic with customers. That's totally a comfortable interaction for you. It's the interview that's throwing you off. That's uncomfortable. You've got to practice being able to walk in with a smile, making eye contact. And then it's just a rule in American business. A strong handshake conveys a lot. Should it be that way? I don't know. I know that it's true though. And that when people come in and they can put their hand out and confidently shake yours, it communicates a lot of things about confidence and competence. And so you've got to practice it. You don't get good at handshaking unless you actually practice it. And I mean that in all sincerity. I have asked people that I know, family members, good friends, will you help me practice a good handshake? Because we don't necessarily get to do it all the time. It's not as common now as it was 30 or 40 years ago. But in this moment, if you don't have a firm handshake, that can come across negatively. And it could come down to these little things that ultimately make someone decide, I don't know if they're the best fit. This other person I think might be a little better for us. You also need to be ready for a little bit of small talk. For some of you that's totally comfortable, you can get along with anybody right away and basically make a new best friend very quickly. For some of us, I was like this. Small talk is terrifying. I don't know what to say. It always feels awkward. When people try to do it with me, I don't want to look at them. I just want it to stop. That's okay. You can practice this too. And you can prepare little things knowing in advance that if this comes up, you walk in, you smile, hi, you meet the receptionist or the assistant that greets you, and they say, how are you doing today? You can be ready for that moment. I'm going to say something positive. I'm going to talk a little bit about my trip getting here. I'm going to ask them how they're doing, right? You can come up with a little formula. I'm doing great today. I'm so excited to be here. I came early because I thought there was going to be traffic. You know, Tuesday at 4 o'clock, I thought people were going to be getting off work, but I actually got here much quicker than I thought. So how are you doing? You decided ahead of time what you were going to do. You got yourself ready, and it comes across much more smoothly. If you're already great at small talk, you may not need to practice. That's fine. But if you're not, be ready to do that. Be ready to fill 30 seconds, 45 seconds with a natural feeling interaction with somebody. You don't want it to feel awkward. Again, they might decide that means something to them. I'm not sure how you're going to be able to talk with our customers. That was kind of awkward between us. It may be you're fine with customers, but they need to see that as part of the interview process. During the interview, if you want people to think you're confident, in our culture, there are 4 things that you can do. Again, smile, project positivity, make eye contact. That is interpreted as being confident, as telling the truth, as knowing what you're talking about. When you don't make eye contact, that's the behavior that people will use when they're lying to us a lot of times. People learn that as kids, not necessarily someone told them, but they learn in repeated interactions with people to interpret it that way. And so when you turn your eyes away, that might be because you're just not that comfortable making direct eye contact with people. But it's going to be misread if you do it. And so you've got to practice being able to do that in that moment. When you're asked an interview question, speak more loudly than you think you need to. Speak a little more slowly than you think you need to. As you get nervous, the likelihood that you're going to start talking really fast goes up and up and up. And then the faster you talk, the more you might trip over your words or forget to say what you meant to say or make it harder for the other person to hear you. And when you speak more loudly, I guarantee you, you're not yelling at everyone. When we're interviewing, especially if we're nervous, we might start to actually become a little more quiet. That will be read by the interviewer as a lack of confidence. Most importantly with this one, though, is that if the person that's interviewing you isn't able to hear you very well, whether that is their own hearing is slightly impaired, or it's just the ambient noise going on around them, they may not stop and tell you, I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite hear it. And they may not quite heard what you said and decide, well, I'm just going to move on, not ask, and you're not going to get the benefit of any of the information you just shared. And so speak more loudly than you think you need to. It could help the other person, but it's going to project some confidence. And so I see now that there are 2 questions that have popped up in the chat. Great questions that we should talk about right now. And when I do this, I'm going to go ahead and take it off the PowerPoint so you can see me a little better. So 1, is there any point in an interview that someone should mention that they have a disability? My first response would be most of the time, absolutely not. That said, a lot of hiring managers have no idea around the laws around disabilities and hiring and what they can and can't do. And so if you have any reason to think that you might be perceived negatively in your ability to do this job because somebody can perceive a disability, you can absolutely choose to directly confront that. There's nothing that means that would stop you. It's not illegal for you to talk about your disability. It's illegal for the company to decide not to hire you because of your disability, but that can be very difficult to know that it's happening or to even prove. And so if you do feel like this person isn't going to understand that I can do this job because they can see something about me that makes them think that I have a disability or that I actually do and they can see it, it's perfectly fine to decide I'm going to tackle that up front, which really gets to the second question. If for some reason eye contact is really difficult, then yes, I think absolutely you want to address that. You don't necessarily need to say, I have autism, I'm on the spectrum, that's why eye contact is difficult. But I think it's totally okay to say, it might be beneficial. I just want to let you know, I get a little uncomfortable sometimes with eye contact. I don't always do it as much as I should. I hope you won't hold that against me in this. Something like that, where you immediately call it out and you get to gauge their response right away. I think a lot of hiring managers are going to say, oh, not a problem at all. I feel that way a lot of the times too. If they react more negatively, like, well, why is that a problem for you? I don't understand. You are getting information that's going to help you decide, is this a place I really want to work? Because if that's the way they're going to react to me right now, while we're just in an interview, how are we going to be able to work together successfully if they actually hire me? And so you can gauge their reaction and use that as another piece of information to help you decide if you really want to work there or not. Lisa asked during an interview, if I'm asked a question, I'm not 100% sure of the answer. Is it okay to ask for a moment to gather my thoughts? If so, what's the best way to go about this? Yes, definitely. So the way that I would do this is to give the impression that you are giving this some serious consideration. And this is kind of a dated reference, but this is one of the things that former President Bill Clinton did really well. I had a chance to see him in person one time. And he had this way of making you feel like you were the most important person in the room, and he's walking down kind of a line of people and shaking hands, and they would ask something and he would stop and kind of, that's a really good question. Buying himself some time, right, to decide how to answer. Something like that can help you buy time to gather your thoughts. And so you don't necessarily have to say, give me a minute to think through this. You can, without saying that, acknowledge that, oh, wow, you know what, that's a really great question. As I think about this, I think the best example that I could give, you show them that you're being thoughtful about it. You're really kind of analyzing and you want to be responsive to what they want without it looking like I was totally unprepared for you to ask me that. And I'm caught off guard and I have no idea what to do right now. I think that for most interviewers, most hiring managers, it's going to be totally fine if you say, oh, wow, I hadn't really anticipated that. Let me give that some thought. If what comes after that is a solid answer, but it may, for some, they may think, well, if you didn't expect I was going to ask you that, you really don't understand this job. And if somebody else that interviewed was able to do that more seamlessly, it could end up counting against you. And so I would use more of an approach of acknowledging that it's a great question they just asked and that you want to give them a really great example. Saying it that way gives the idea of like, I have an immediate answer I could just throw at you. Let me just take a minute to really give this the appropriate consideration. Not seeing any follow-up questions at this time. I'll jump back over to the slides. Okay, so during the interview, smile, make eye contact, speak loudly, speak slowly so that you're heard and understood. If you want to sound competent, you want to talk about successes. Everything that you talk about should be ultimately framed in successes. Even if the question is, what is your greatest weakness? Or tell me about a time you failed. Failure is that one moment that happened, right? I was given an assignment. I had to complete a report by Tuesday. I didn't get it done till Wednesday. That's the failure. But I'm not going to stop my answer there. The next thing out of my mouth is going to be, from that I learned that I need to prioritize work more effectively. So I did a little bit of research and I learned about the Pomodoro method. where you set timers for each task to make sure that you stay on track. Since then, 100% of the time I've got my reports in on time. You end up framing it around successes. That's a really powerful example of you made a mistake, you learned from it, now you're doing better. Every hiring manager in the world wants to know that that's what you're going to do, because we're all human, we're all going to make mistakes. You want to describe the actual things, like the behaviors that you do, not just what you're responsible for. So the answer to a question about, tell me your customer service experience, is not, I've had 3 jobs where I had to do customer service. Next question. It's talking about what you actually do. What makes good customer service? I've had a lot of experience with customer service in my past 3 jobs where I've learned that it's important to make eye contact with people, listen to what they're telling me, and ask follow-up questions to make sure I really understand what they need. Find multiple solutions to solve their problem. Whatever the steps were that went into that, that's what you want to talk about, what you actually did, the behaviors that you used. If you can do it, you want to connect your past experience to the job that you're hiring for. And so from that experience I've had in those customer service roles, I know that I could do a great job of serving customers in this bank. You want to talk about future growth, especially if you're early in your employment history, you don't have a lot of jobs to point back to. You really want to be able to project, I have some customer service experience in this environment, and I know that as I am doing this job, I'll continue to build on those skills. I'm going to get better and better at it as it goes along. 2 things to never do, though. Don't exaggerate and try to oversell yourself, so to speak. You don't want to give a hiring manager a sales pitch, get hired, show up on day 1 and not be able to do what you said you can do. That's the quickest way to lose your job and get fired. And don't try to interview the interviewer. Don't try to turn it back around on them. So they ask about your customer service experience, and then you turn and say, yeah, I've got customer service experience in my prior 3 jobs. Now, what does customer service mean for you here? Like, you're going to get them to somehow tell you that you should want to work here. Remember, your only job in the interview is to get a job offer. And by asking them questions to help them kind of sell themselves on you, you're taking time away from that. And you're risking that they're going to be frustrated by what you're doing and not hire you or not offer you a job. I see a question in the chat. I'm going to come back to that in a couple minutes, finish up the section on interviews, and we'll talk a little bit about that topic. It's very likely in an interview, when you get to the end, they're going to ask you some kind of version of, do you have any questions for us? You want to be prepared for this moment. You don't want to get caught off guard. And so here's what you do. Yes, I have a question. There's only one question that you ever really need to ask here. I'm exaggerating a little bit. There's possible there could be others. But this is the most important thing, is if I'm hired in this job, what are you going to expect me to be doing, to accomplish in the first 3 months? In this next kind of recent timeline, the recent future, you don't necessarily, 3 months isn't a magical number. But basically, what do you expect out of me as I'm hired in the initial period? And the reason that you ask this question is because their answer is going to tell you a lot about what you're going to need to be able to accomplish. And when they answer it, it gives you this follow-up opportunity to one last chance to really sell them on the idea that you're the best candidate for this job. And so they tell you, we're within the first 3 months, we're going to look to get you fully trained on our computer system, and you're going to be able to handle, 78 transactions an hour like our best cashiers. Thank you. Customer service skills I learned working at a prior job, or that I developed volunteer opportunity, whatever it is, are going to help me fit in here quickly and do that thing that they talked about. You'll have to frame these other pieces around the specifics of the job, but you get a chance to talk about yourself doing their job really well, and you can frame it with some specifics. And so it depends kind of on what the job you're applying for and how they answer that question. In the first 3 months, we expect you're going to do a comprehensive analysis of our total sales volume over the last 3 years and what our goal should be for next year. Thank you so much. the analytic skills that I've been learning in my statistics 101 class are going to help me do that analysis accurately, quickly, and get you those sales numbers, within that time period or whatever it is. Don't ask questions like, do you offer paid leave? Would I have to work weekends? Will you work around my school schedule? All of those kinds of questions come after they've given you a job offer, not before, because that's your goal, right? Is to get that job offer. Once you have a job offer, it's all about your needs now. Do I actually want to take your offer? Do I want to work here? That's when you can ask all those questions. You want anything you do here to let you give more information to them about why you're qualified. Once that's over, and they're basically saying, okay, thanks for coming in. It was great to meet you. You want to close the interview. You want to leave them with the impression that you've got desire to get this job offer. And the best way to do that is to just come right out and say it. Thank you so much for interviewing me, for the opportunity to meet with you today. Some kind of initial statement. I would really like to get a job offer. Here's why. And then you kind of close with your sales pitch about yourself. If you've already got the knowledge and skills to do the job, that's your close, right? I know that the skills that I've built over the course of my prior 3 years working or whatever are going to mean I'm going to be immediately successful for you. If you don't, if this is a first job for you, I know the things that I've learned through school, through my work with this organization that I volunteered at, are going to help me very quickly learn how to do this work and immediately start contributing results for you. But you want them, as you walk out that door, going, wow, they really are enthusiastic about working. They just straight up ask me for a job. Not a lot of people are willing to do this, and it communicates a lot of positives. I don't think you're ever going to have anybody react negatively to you saying, I'd really like to get a job offer. That's why you're here. If you don't, then I call this failing forward. Failure is not a bad thing. I've interviewed for more jobs that I didn't get than jobs that I did get over the course of my life. I learned from every one of those experiences. You can tell right away when they ask you an interview question and you don't answer it well, you know it, right? So you can go back and think about that. Did I not answer it well because I'm lacking some knowledge, some skills, some abilities? Okay, well, how do I get that experience? Is there a class I could take where I could build more knowledge in this area? Is there a volunteer opportunity somewhere where I could get a little bit of experience around that? Are there people that I know that have some experience or expertise that can teach me some of this in some way? It's an opportunity for you to figure out, what do you need to do to be better qualified in the future? Can you find opportunities? I use the term KSAs there just for space. That's knowledge, skills, and abilities. And if you have a current job, are there new assignments, projects you could volunteer for? Hey, I'd really like to understand more about the reports that we write. Is it possible I could shadow somebody, or could I take on writing one of those next time? People love that, right? When employees walk in and say, hey, I want to take on more responsibility, I want to do more work. I don't think anybody's ever upset by that. That's tremendous. You can ask for feedback. Some employers are not going to give you any feedback. Say, sorry, we don't talk about the interview. Some may be more than willing to say, yeah, here's where the couple things that came up that you didn't do so well, or we were concerned about, or other people just did better. If you can't get that from the person you interviewed with or from the company, ask your friends, ask family, ask people you trust. Hey, let me give you an idea of what I did in the interview. What would you point out that I might be able to do better? In the end, you take this information and you keep practicing interviewing. You keep practicing answering questions, be able to get more short, more concise, more direct with your responses, talking about successes and outcomes and how you did it. It's also an opportunity to build your network. And so when you get that call for, hey, sorry, we ended up going in another direction, this is an opportunity to add somebody to your network. I really appreciate the opportunity to interview with you. I learned from that interview. Would it be okay if I kept in touch with you? Future opportunities come up I want to apply for. Don't let that relationship just go. Use that as a chance to continue to build positive relationships, because if you do apply in the future, that person probably will remember that. I had to call them and tell them we're not going to offer a job, which doesn't feel good. I've had to do that so many times in my career. I never look forward to that phone call. If you react positively when I have to make it, you're going to stand out in my mind and think, hey, that's a person that we do want to hire when we find the right opportunity. All right, so here's all the things that I told you. I want to jump back now and pick up on the question from Naomi. So if you're re-entering the job market after raising kids, or you've had a break for any other reason, you do want to be able to communicate why there is a gap in your resume. That's definitely one of the things that people look for and often consider a red flag. I don't agree with considering it a red flag, but the reality is it's happening out there, right? So you want to be able to talk about why you've got that gap. And then you want to talk about why you're ready to come back to the workforce now. You don't want somebody to be afraid that you're not going to stay if they hire you. And that is a real concern a lot of hiring managers lead. So I don't know that I would necessarily go into a lot of details around why I have the gap, but just to simply state, I've got 2 years where I haven't worked because I've been doing childcare. But I'm coming back into the workplace now to continue building my career. I am looking for long-term steady employment to continue to have growth and advancement opportunities, something that very quickly communicates to them. I'm here, if you hire me, I'm gonna be reliable, I'm gonna show up, I'm gonna work hard, I'm gonna work smart. But you do wanna be prepared to just acknowledge that it's there. You may also have some skills gaps, right? And so you want to be able to talk about anything that you've done to keep your skills current or to build on them while you haven't been at work. And so if you have taken some classes, even if you just by yourself independently read books on a topic, yeah, I've been out of the workforce for a couple of years. I've been doing childcare duties, or I've been caring for my parents, or whatever that reason is. During that time, though, I've taken classes on, or I read this book, or I did these things, whatever those might be, that have helped to keep my skills current so that they're not worried that you don't actually know how to do the things that are in your employment past that you did 5 years ago because you've been out of the workforce for a while. Nate asks, I work for a company that does panel interviews. My current supervisor is often on the panels. Should I tell them in advance I'm applying for a new position as a show of respect? And they aren't supposed to see me. In the past, they've asked other employees in supervision why you're leaving us after seeing them in an interview. Nate, absolutely 100%. Talk to your current supervisor, if at all possible, as you're going through your job search, but definitely before you go into an interview. If for no other reason, a lot of companies do reference checks after interviews with current supervisors. And if they find out because somebody called them to ask questions about you because you've interviewed for their job, you might come to work tomorrow and find out you don't have a job anymore. And so it's part of a professional relationship. The way that I handle this, I talk to my boss well in advance of even looking for a job if I have a current one. I want to talk a little bit about kind of my career goals. And this could be personal life. As I've talked with my family, long term, we see ourselves living in Sacramento. And so at some point, I'm going to start looking for those opportunities. It's not today. I'm not looking to leave. Then when you do have that conversation, it's much easier to come back and say, hey, we talked about the fact that I've been looking for management opportunities. I just saw one come up at this other company. And now you could even frame it as, what's your advice on this? Is this the right opportunity? People feel good when you kind of validate their authority, right, and their experience. And so they hear that now in a very different way than I'm trying to leave. You don't want them to get surprised if at all possible. So highly encourage you to try to build the relationship so that you can go in and have that conversation. Lisa, I know we're a couple minutes over. Is it okay if I take the last
Yes.
question?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, so Desiree, how would you explain a lack of employment due to incarceration? So California passed a law a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago now, around when employers can ask about criminal records. And they can't ask it now as an initial screening on your application. They can ask about it once they've made a job offer. So if you have a gap in employment due to incarceration, eventually they're going to be able to ask, do you have a criminal history? You're going to have to disclose it, and you're going to have to talk about it at some point. So I don't see any reason not to do it during the interview and to tackle that up front. I think it'll come across as I'm honest and open and transparent about this. I get to talk about what I've learned from those experiences and how that will affect the way that I do things going into the future. So I absolutely would tackle that during an interview and frame it as, here's how that has helped me develop as a person. And this is why you're going to be able to rely on me going into the future, because I have learned from mistakes, and here's how I've done that. It gives you a chance to own that conversation and take control of that narrative, and not have them find out later and then be going, why didn't you tell me about that? And does that mean, and all the negatives can come in. All right, don't see any other questions.
I don't either. Are there any last minute questions for Greg that anyone has? Feel free to put them in the chat. I can follow up with him after we sign off. If you come up with a question and want to email me, I'll put my email in the link. I'd just like to say thank you to Greg and his knowledge and for sharing that with everyone. I've learned a lot. I'm sure the students have as well. So thank you for that, Greg. We appreciate your time. And
you're welcome.
A last reminder to students that if you need credit or offer credit from your instructor, to send me your instructor's name and your first and last name so I can be sure to report back to your attendees or your instructors. I think that will wrap it up for the day.
All right, thank you everyone. Have a great weekend. Good
Thank
luck
you,
in your
Greg.
job
We
search.
appreciate it. Have a good one.